Hello everyone and welcome back to the 2022 Book Battle Bracket Awards, whatever. My recap of my favorite books that I read in 2022. There is a part 1 for this video where you see me get down to the semi-finalists to where we get to where we are today. And that video went longer than I initially intended, so this is part 2.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
And I actually have to do the hard work of pitting some of my favorite books against each other to see who comes out on top as my favorite book of 2022, book or series. I combined series into the same thing. I know that's going to bother some people, but this is going to be hard enough as it is. Just give me one win. We are starting off today with 8 semifinalists, and we are going to get it down to one final winner. The semifinalists are Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson, Dead Man's Hand by James E. Butcher, The Threadlight series by Zach Argyle, Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle, The Stones of Altara by Christopher Clargo, the Cradle series by Will White, the John Cleaver series by Dan Wells, and the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I do anticipate some of today's matchups to be quite hard emotionally for me, so I ask you to just bear with me if I end up crying. Please let me know in the comments down below if you think I made any grave mistakes, and make sure to rep your favorite series in the comments as well. Please like this video if you like it.
Round 1. Fight!
The first matchup we're talking about here today is Mistborn Era 2 versus Dead Man's Hand. Now, if you've been following the channel for very long, you will know that I love the Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson, and Mistborn Era 2 is one of my favorite elements of the Cosmere. It's so dang fun, and it's a very unique feel within fantasy. In addition, it has the strength of continuing the magic system from Mistborn Era 1, one of the widest spread and most popular series in adult epic fantasy. So obviously I love me some Mistborn Era 2, and I really like the Lost Metal, though I had some conflicting points about it. There's a full video review which is linked down below if you want to check that out. But Dead Man's Hand as a debut novel is not to be trifled with. This paranormal fantasy about a wizard down on his luck by James Butcher follows after the trend of his father, Jim Butcher, who wrote the Dresden Files series. In a lot of ways, he does certain aspects better than his father does, but while it doesn't reach the lows of the Dresden Files, it also doesn't reach the highs, and Mistborn Era 2 is just one of my favorites. So Mistborn Era 2 is going to take this round, moving forward to the quarterfinalist spot. Next up, we have Threadlight by Zach Argyle versus Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle. A.G. Riddle is one of my favorite independently published authors. This is not one of my favorite of his books, but it's still very, very good. This would have been one of my most anticipated books this year. It deals with time travel in a way that breaks my brain. I mean, all time travel kind of breaks my brain, but this one is particularly difficult to handle. But the characters are great, and the scenarios that they're put in is memorable. It's a story that really sticks with you. Opposite that is the Threadlight series by Zach Argyle, of which I've only read the first 2 books. So I haven't actually read the entire trilogy, but the difference between book 1 and book 2 was huge for me, and I enjoyed book 1 a decent amount. I really wish I had read book 3 here, because it's entirely possible that after reading book 3, I might have had this one succeed over A.G. Riddle's Lost in Time, and I may still. Honestly, I haven't made my decision yet. Lost in Time is one of those plots that I've seen elements of used before, but executed in this manner with the characters that we see and with the mystery playing out as it does, I definitely really enjoyed it. My wife also really enjoyed this one. But Threadlight is a new magic system in an epic fantasy world. I love it. I think I'm just gonna have to go with my gut here. Epic fantasy is my roots. The Threadlight series is great, and it only continues to get better as I spend more time with it. And honestly, I think if I read book 1 now, I would see more kernels of cool things that were eventually paid off in book 2. And while A.G. Riddle is one of my favorite authors, and I did enjoy this book, I do think some of his previous works I loved a lot more. So I have to give this round to Zach Argyle and the Threadlight series for making it as another quarterfinalist for the 2022 Book Bracket Battle Awards, whatever you want to call it. Congratulations to Zach Argyle and the Threadlight series.
Round 3.
Next up, we have The Stones of Altara, which was my recommendation for semifinalists for the SPFBO 8 Awards, which is a self-published fantasy blog off. It's this competition that Mark Lawrence runs every year, and I was asked to be a judge for Team Bookborn to help her select the semifinalists. And The Stones of Altara is not what it seems. There's mysteries around every corner, and there's plot twists happening constantly. The scale of this one is really cool, and while I have seen stories like this, I haven't seen them play out in the way that this one does. It has a dark tone to it. It has a lot of really, really cool characters, and there's still so much mystery left unsolved. I've recommended this book to a lot of people, and I would continue to recommend this book to a lot of people. Unfortunately, this one's going up against Cradle by Will White. Now, I have many videos on this channel dedicated to Cradle, and I talked a lot about Cradle in the previous video, so check those out if you want to hear me really gush about Cradle. But Cradle has become one of my favorite series of all time. The way that Will White is able to take a basic premise and turn it into an amazing, charming, heartfelt, inspirational, fist-pumping story of just beautiful progression and an amazing magic system with some of the best fantasy battles that you can see. Cradle is going to move forward as a quarterfinalist in this matchup. Congratulations again to Will White. And the final matchup in the semifinalist round goes to John Cleaver versus the Lunar Chronicles. Now, this one is a really tough matchup because it's so disparate in style and tone and why I like each of these series. John Cleaver really deals with psychological horror, paranormal fantasy horror, and really getting into the mind of a sociopath as he deals with his inner demons as well as maybe potentially some outer demons. This is a series that has really stuck with me. It's also a series I was able to read with my wife, and she loved it as well. But it's dark and strange and really, really, really sticks in my craw because it deals with a lot of complex things, like a character who is really bad, but you want to root for him, but he's doing good things, but he also does bad things. But the people that he's doing bad things to are mostly worse. And there's some really gut punch emotional moments in this series. On the other hand, the Lunar Chronicles is like one of the perfect epitomes of a YA series for me. It's science fiction fairy tale retellings done excellently and crafted into a greater overall narrative that is fighting way out of its weight class given the elements that make it up. It's just way more than the sum of its parts, and it gave me the fairy tale vibes that I haven't really felt since I was a kid. I think the Lunar Chronicles is excellent, and I'm surprised it doesn't continue to get more love on BookTube even as it ages. Its characterization as it plays with the fairy tale backdrops and then sort of spins certain things on their head while also remaining true to the source material, I think it's excellent. This is the first one that really pains me because I genuinely love both of these series, and I genuinely love them for very different reasons, very different tones. I did split my reading of the Lunar Chronicles up over 2 main periods, and I took a big break in the middle. So while I love it, it wasn't necessarily as gripping to me as John Cleaver, which I read the entire 6-book series in the course of maybe 2 weeks. And I also begged my wife to read that one right away. She's also reading the Lunar Chronicles, and she's really enjoying that as well. But I think I'm gonna have to give this one to John Cleaver. This is no slam against Marissa Meyer and the Lunar Chronicles, which I've only praised. It's just a huge achievement for John Cleaver to be able to beat the Lunar Chronicles in this category because it's something that I couldn't put down, and it's something that's stuck in my brain heavily since I read it. It's made me want to read more Dan Wells way sooner than later. So of course, when I found out that he is now part of Dragonsteel and he's gonna be writing parts of the Cosmere, I'm curious, is he gonna bring more horror fantasy to the Cosmere? I'm down. And thus, we have reached the quarterfinalists. On one side of the bracket, we have Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson versus Threadlight by Zach Argyle. And on the other side of the bracket, we have Cradle versus John Cleaver. How do you think this one is going to pan out? Let me know in the comments down below. I am not 100% sure myself, because what we have ended up here is my favorite books are making it to the end. Of course, this is my freaking bracket. But when I actually have to pit my favorites against each other, and they're so different and I love them, this is where it feels like I have to pick a favorite child, which I would never do in real life. But every freaking year at the end of the year, you freaking force me to do it. This is your fault, you sick fricks. Before we move into the quarterfinalist round, I'm just gonna take a second to plug my Discord. Ever since creating this BookTube channel, the Discord, which you can find linked below, it's called Michael's Book Friends, has been one of my favorite things on the, like, just getting real for a second. Being able to chat and have conversations both about books and just about everything in general has been amazing. It's something that I thrive on. I love talking to you guys every day about all things serious and less serious. Being able to share passion for the books that we love, the memes that have been created around this channel, around other videos, being able to see videos from other creators as well, being able to try to encourage people to make BookTube channel content of their own. I am obviously biased because it's my Discord, but I love the community that we've created there, and I would love to have you join. If you've never been part of a Discord community before, but you're curious, check out the link down below. I feel like it's a pretty chill vibe there most of the time. We got a lot of jokes, we got a lot of friends. It's pretty fun. Now let's move on to the quarterfinals.
Another one bites the dust.
With the first matchup, I have already talked about both these series a lot. There's actually multiple videos for each of these series on my channel thus far. Mistborn Era 2 has a video for each book. I've also done collaborative discussions with other people on their channels about Mistborn Era 2 multiple times. Mistborn Era 2 is something that I love, and rereading it this year along with the addition of the Lost Metal only made me love it more. Even though if you check out my review for the Lost Metal, I didn't love the ending. I don't think it was perfectly stuck. And unfortunately, I just wasn't able to get to Bonds of Chaos, the final book in the Threadlight trilogy. Even though I really love that series from what I've read so far, I haven't been able to finish it out, and it hasn't reached the heights of Mistborn Era 2. So Mistborn Era 2 is going to take the finalist slot on this side of the bracket. Congratulations to Brandon Sanderson. I'm sure that's a big shocker, but also congratulations to Zach Argyle. You should go check out the Threadlight series. One of the best self-published fantasy series that I've read, and I still want to read book 3. On the other side of the bracket, we have Cradle and we have John Cleaver. Both of these series I binged. Both of these series I binged around the same time, right after a fairly long reading slump. Both of these series had me binging tons of books in a row after a reading slump. Cradle was like 9 books at the time that I read that. It could have already been 10. I can't remember. Meanwhile, John Cleaver is 6 books and then like a short story. Cradle gives me hope. It inspires me. It gets me excited. It brings out my youthful masculinity and like the things that I wish I could have experienced when I was a kid. Like, this is the story that I wish I had been able to read when I was a teenage boy. John Cleaver is a series I'm glad I didn't read when I was a teenage boy because I was already emo enough. But as an adult, reading John Cleaver is the closest I've felt to my favorite parts of Death Note since watching Death Note. The anime, the original, not the Netflix adaptation. Astute viewers of the channel, however, will notice that one of these series was in my top 5 favorite series and the other one was not. And to this day, I honestly regret making any lists ever. In fact, I regret making these battle videos almost immediately after I make them. Last year, I think 2 weeks after I made my tier ranking videos of all my 2021 reads, I was looking at some of the decisions that I made and I thought that I was crazy because our perceptions change over time. That being said, the series that's going to be moving forward in this book battle is going to be Cradle by Will White, as much as I obviously freaking love the John Cleaver series by Dan Wells. This one is the one that hurts a lot. It's hard for me to say I'm going to regret it because I love Cradle so much, but I don't know how to praise Cradle and move Cradle forward without it inherently seeming like I am dissing John Cleaver in some way. I don't want you to take it that way at all. How do you measure the power of series and the way that they affect you in different ways when they're so different? The diversity of different vibes that we get from fantasy books are why we love reading different fantasy books. I feel like I stated one of the most obvious things in the world and pretended that it was deep just now. And now we have our finalists. The 2022 book battle bracket has boiled down to these 2 series, Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson and Cradle by Will White. How many of you people that have been watching since the beginning predicted this outcome? I'm curious. You didn't have to follow my channel very closely to realize that I love both of these series. I've also talked essentially nonstop about both of these series in my Discord. But this is where I freaking get mad about everything in the world on this channel because you always want me to rank things that I love, and I always find that difficult, and ranking Cradle and Mistborn Era 2, it's not fair. They just aren't the same thing, and I love them for different reasons. And then you have the extra question of, well, if I had to pick one of them for a desert island, would I pick Mistborn Era 2 or would I pick Cradle? I'm probably gonna pick Cradle in that case. Mistborn Era 2 is amazing on its own right, but a lot of the amazingness also comes from the fact that it comes from Mistborn Era 1 and it exists within the Cosmere, but that doesn't stop the fun that I have with it and the fact that it is amplified by being in the Cosmere and having other connections that I also love. But Cradle is also something that hit me out of left field. I've had people commenting on the channel that I should read Cradle for so long, and then I finally did, and I binged it, and I'm hooked. And I will say that the most recent entries to both of these series, Dread God versus the Lost Metal, frick, which of those 2 did I like more? If we take it back 1 book, and it was the Bands of Mourning versus Reaper, I feel like Reaper would definitely win that matchup. When we bring it forward to Dreadgod versus the Lost Metal. You know what? I still think Dreadgod is going to win that matchup. Reaper obviously had the reveal of one of the biggest plot twists in Cradle, and it was dope, and it also brought me to tears. The Lost Metal, I feel like I should have been more teary, but the way that it was handled, it didn't land as hard as I wish it did for me, even though I enjoyed it. Also, The Lost Metal was a conclusion of a series that I loved, but I didn't necessarily love the conclusion. Dreadgod is the penultimate book in that. I do think Dread maybe more than Bands of Mourning. It's a tough one. As awesome as Cradle is, I don't think it, from a literary perspective, ever hits the critical, like, if you want to talk about like whatever the critical objective standard is, I think Shadows of Self is actually an excellent book that is way more deep and complex than maybe people give it credit for, especially because Mistborn Era 2 in general is not loved as much as Mistborn Era 1. But I don't think Cradle at any point is trying to aim for the goals that Shadows of Self does. I also don't know if as a whole cohesive book, Mistborn Era 2 ever gets as dense and concise as Shadows of Self, though I think there are really good pieces in other books. This freaking sucks, man. I'm sitting here as a huge Cosmere fan that's always preaching the good word of Mistborn Era 2, but I think I'm gonna have to pick Cradle as the winner. I'm stating it right here, right now. I may regret it tomorrow, but I don't regret it right now. The winner of the book bracket battle 2022 is going to be Cradle. I'm already having second thoughts. No, but I will stand firm. I will be like Wei Shi Linden, and I will set my path and I will follow it. Cradle wins 2022 for me here on the channel. Obviously, I also love Mistborn Era 2. Frick, what a freaking stupid matchup. I don't know why every year I succumb to the pressure to do this to myself. Every year I end up frustrated and unsatisfied because I feel like I slighted my favorite book at the expense of just loving another favorite book. But congratulations to Will White. I can't wait to see the finale of Cradle. And like, congratulations to Brandon Sanderson too, but the dude he's doing well. I want to take this opportunity now to thank you all for watching, not just this video, but my channel in general. The discussions that I have, the friendships that I've made on this channel, the conversations that I get to have, like, this channel has been a huge life changer for me in so many ways. I realize that I'm a small channel, but I genuinely have been able to make friends doing this. I get to express myself in a way that is creatively fulfilling, talking to people that are genuinely passionate about the same things that I am, and I love it. I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful. I'm so freaking hype for going into 2023. It's gonna be an amazing year. I can't wait to meet new people. I can't wait to have new series just hit me over the head with how awesome they are, and I can't wait to share those experiences with you. If you'd like to follow me on this journey of awesome reading in 2023, please consider subscribing to the channel. I would love that. But I can't make you do anything. I'm not your dad, but I am your best friend. Happy New Year. Happy 2023 in reading. Goodbye.
I never get enough sleep. Sleep, no, I never get enough. Always waking up tired. Sleep, no, I never get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no, I never get enough. Always waking up tired. Sleep, no, I never get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.